let me start. I'm recording now. Just let me begin by saying that to work in a congregation today involves a lot of work. There's the work you see, but picking out music takes a long time. Tomorrow, we're talking about Journey, and you'll never guess what I stumbled upon by accident. Ruth, the story of Ruth. How I stumbled upon that by accident is scary. It's amazing what your brain does when you least expect it. And then to put that all together and talk about our journeys as a group takes time, because a lot of you sent in information about your journeys, including someone who referred to one of their marriages as the great unpleasantness. That has to win the award. The award of all times, the great unpleasantness. That has gone down in my vocabulary. It's a great way to describe a relationship, the great unpleasant. I love that. Yes, the things I learned from this group. The other things you don't see, by the way, which takes a tremendous amount of time, it goes under the rubric of pastoral care. This week, I spent hours with several families having stress for a variety of very complex reasons. And obviously, this is confidential. But when you are in an urban area and your congregation is half in the urban area and half of our congregation is outside of Miami. A chunk of it is in Florida. The rest of it is outside of Florida. When you put that together, it takes a lot of time. And so I found myself running out of time. And my cardiologist said to me, "You have been blessed and cursed at the same time." He said, "Your hypermetabolism, your supermetabolism disguises and masks both your age and the fact you have a heart transplant." He said, "That's good because it gives you a lot of energy to do things nobody your age should be able to do, especially if they have a heart transplant. The bad news is it lets you do too much." So he said, "I'm warning you, you've got to stop. You can't do any more than you're doing." He said, "Your body is not helping you." So I've looked at the schedule for this next 2 months. I have 3 services in November. I've got Sunday, the 21st, and then we're having our first face-to-face meeting at Varieties. We've got 2 services in December, and then we've got a face-to-face on Christmas Eve. Let me remind you, if you're coming Christmas Eve, to do an RSVP, because we may have to have 2 services Christmas Eve if we have too many, and that's perfectly fine. The last congregation I had, we had 4 on Christmas Eve, so 2 is simple. This is what I'm used to doing. So all I'm saying is this takes a lot of time. And then there are other emergencies that come in. I have 4 weddings and all the rest of that. By the way, my 3 college classes are a riot. They get all their stuff done early. They're easy. They're easy. That's like an almost ran. So I just share that with you. Why we need to take a break. There's only so much I can do. Now we've got a book. We're ready to go. We've got the Bible, a biography by Karen Armstrong. That's going to take us a long time. It gives us something solid. It's gotten terrific reviews. Danny and Maureen were right. It's a terrific book. It's gotten terrific reviews. It's readable too. A lot of stuff is not very readable. So that's where we're going to go in the new year, and it'll take us probably a couple of years maybe. Which, by the way, I'm used to. Every Bible study I've had on Genesis took at least 2 years. And that's because you review, you just don't start off like, here's chapter 2, you go back and review to keep everybody fresh. So we'll have a nice plan ahead of us. All right, now having said all of that, let me also say my patience with angels has run out. Absolutely run out. I have some ideas, and I don't think they're that far off. But let me begin by some of the stuff in the book, and then let me share with you some ideas I have. And first of all, let me preface this by saying Homo sapiens as a species has, among other problems, the idea that if something is wrong is repeated long enough, it becomes true. And this becomes a major problem for Homo sapiens in any religion or any group. You tell people that Eve didn't eat an apple, and they will get very offended. They are absolutely convinced that the Bible says that Eve ate an apple. And if you tell them it's not in the Bible, they'll tell you you're reading the wrong Bible. Folklore has had a tremendous impact on all religions. My experience has been very few people have actually read texts. What they've done is heard what people have said about texts. And if somebody's grandmother said something or great-grandmother and it got passed out, it must be true. Don't you dare argue with my grandmother. She knows the Bible. She never read it, by the way, never read text. She heard things that were passed down. So if a classic example, Eve never said ate an apple. In fact, there were no freaking apple trees in that part of the world. It was an apple. It was probably a pomegranate or a fig. The other classic thing I mentioned is three kings. Never, ever, ever did it mention three kings in the Gospel of Matthew. Never did it give three names. All it ever said, ever, was wise men from the East. The story makes no sense whatsoever when you actually read the story. Why? For instance, it says at the end, they departed secretly on another way. Herod the Great was a paranoid, almost schizophrenic. He killed most of the members of his family. He had spies everywhere. There were only a couple of ways out of Bethlehem because why? There was desert, the Petra, the desert to the east. There were only a couple of ways out, and he had those guarded everywhere. So to say they have escaped secretly just doesn't make sense. The other thing that doesn't make sense, if this happened, this story happened, why does nobody else know about it anywhere in the entire New Testament? That always comes as a big surprise to everybody. Nobody knows anywhere about any wise men visiting Jesus anywhere. So you get something that gets passed down. What happened was you got a bunch of illiterate people who don't know anything, so they have pageants. So somewhere in the 2nd or 3rd century on the Iberian Peninsula, they started having pageants to celebrate something they couldn't read. And when they put the pageant together, they knew wise men wouldn't make any sense, but you said three kings, yes, we get it. And so you have to give them names. So this fiction, exactly what it is, the fiction to tell a story. Remember, in antiquity, stories weren't made to be taken literally. They never were. They were made to make it a point. They were made to make a point. You're going to remember a story. Who's going to remember a sermon? Nobody remembers sermons. But a good story you remember. So it's interesting. You look at the story of the wise men. Nobody else knows it because Matthew's trying to make a point. He tells a good point by making a story. That was considered perfectly fine 2,000 years ago. So today you get this thing passed about three kings and people get really mad at you if you say you're wrong. And we do this again and again and again, where we take something that's been passed down and passed down. I'm getting this in angels. This comes along with angels. Just bear with me. And I'm saying, by the way, science is no better. I looked at some things today about science. You ready for this? Time. What you and I have been told about time may be all wrong. There's a professor of physics named Tim Maudlin in New York. He was writing a whole bunch of new stuff and says, what we're considering about time, common sense is correct. What scientists are telling us is all wrong. Ha! Bet you didn't know that. Ready? Number 2, black holes are probably not black and they're probably not holes. Did you know that? The latest thing about black holes in science is we're all wrong. They're not black. They're not holes. They're probably dark stars filled with exotic matter. Who knew? I didn't know. And let us not forget the famous Higgs boson, which I have read 10 times and don't understand worth beans. Higgs boson is like reading some kind of hieroglyphic to me. I looked at the article again this morning on Wikipedia, and I must tell you, I am either dumb or ignorant. I didn't understand it at all. All I know is this guy said this thing existed. These little tiny particles, which almost disappear instantly, exist. Everybody said he was wrong. And by accident, somebody came across this thing and boom, his theory was right. So we get this, science is intended to be self-correcting. The problem is a lot of science is not self-correcting because guess what? We hold on to theories way too long. The only problem I have with science is we tend to forget that I'll put it this way. When I was in school, which isn't fair, I grant that. theories in science were often presented as factual truths. Did anybody else have that experience? That rather than being said, this is a hypothesis, this is a theory, most of the time when I was taking science classes, this theories and hypotheses were presented as actual fact, which always kind of bothered me because Danny's right. It's supposed to be self-correcting. We're supposed to be theories. Theories are maybe let's what we know now. That's not what I ever got in college. If I had been, if the science had been said, what we know now, which will probably change, is, but who knows, 40 or 50 or 100, 2,000 years from now, this will be looked back as primitive. That I could have accepted. But what I got was too many times theories that were presented as infallible facts. Of course, I was in school a long time ago, so maybe things have changed. Now we come to angels. So I start, what prompted all of this stuff for me is I started looking at the stuff for angels today, and I'm finding out there is a huge argument about when angels were created. Who knew? Who knew this? When angels were created. Not only was a big argument about when they were created, how were they created as well. Does anybody care? Big arguments about where and when, and I'm thinking, who cares? Why does anybody argue about this stuff? It reminds me in the field of religion, there is a huge debate as to when Confucius was born. Excuse me, Siddhartha was born 24 or 2,500 years ago. Huge, who cares? He was born a long time ago. I tell my students, he was born 24 or 2,500 years ago. Do you really care? All you need to know, he was born about a long time ago, 24, 25, and this is what counts. But people get big arguments about this stuff. I'm finding myself becoming more and more aggravated. Anyway, so there's a big argument about when they were created, why they were created, and how they were created. And I'm scratching my head and I'm going, really? Then it gets worse. What are angels made of? Did you know this is a burning issue? Are they made of fire? Are they made of light? Or are they made of both? No less than Maimonides and Thomas Aquinas get involved. Far be it from me to argue with Maimonides. What do I know compared to Maimonides, the famous Jewish scribe? He writes, listen to this. We have already stated above that the angels are incorporeal. This agrees with the opinion of Aristotle. There is only this difference in the names employed. He uses the terms intelligences, and we say instead angels. His theory is that the intelligences are intermediate beings between the prime cause and existing things. Really? Far be it from that, then Thomas Aquinas has to weigh in, and he argues, angels do not have bodies. Did you know that? But they often appear to have bodies. So that means if Ron Iton is appearing before us, he doesn't exist, it's just an appearance. Since Ron is the only angel we've got amongst us, I'm sending you a bill for that, by the way. Since Ron is the only angel amongst us, by the way, what you see is not really him. It's the appearance of him. Angels sometimes took on a material body that was made from condensed air. So if you're saying Ron is hot air, that means he's from condensed air. Sorry about that. This looks like a human body, but it is not a living body. So all this hot air that is Ron, that is angelic looking like a body, is not. It's what you think it is. That you didn't know that. Now, while I'm listening to this, I'm thinking about when they were born, why they are born, what they're made of, and what they may appear. Let me return us to those thrilling words of Teresa of Avila. I saw an angel close by me on my left side in bodily form. She disagreed with Maimonides and Thomas Aquinas. He was not large, but small of stature and most beautiful. But I see very well that there is in heaven so great a difference between one angel and another. I cannot explain it. I saw in his hand a long spear of gold, and at the iron's point there seemed to be a little fire. He appeared to me to be thrusting it at times into my heart. Are you listening to this? This is Teresa of Avila believing that an angel has a spear that's tipped with fire and he's thrusting it into her heart and to pierce my very entrails. You know, it's a good thing, by the way. Let me just digress in saying I was not asked anything about this at my ordination council. I do not even want to begin to think what my answers may have been. Nonetheless, all right. He appeared to me to be thrusting it at times into my heart and to pierce my very entrails when he drew it out. He seemed to draw them out also and to leave me all on fire with the great love of God. According to this, the great love of God can be felt when your entrails are being removed out of your body by a pierced a spear that's on fire at the tip. You know, I have been around long enough. I could see in some denominations, somebody would get up and say, does he believe that Teresa Villa is telling the truth? Continuing, the pain was so great that it made me moan. And yet so surpassing was the sweetness of this excessive pain that I could not wish to be rid of it. Did you hear what I just read? This woman had her entrails removed, pierced with a spear that has fire on the tip, jabbed into her heart. And as these entrails are being moved and she's being poked with his spear, it caused her to moan. Yet so surpassing was the sweetness of excessive pain that I could not wish to be rid of it. You do realize there is something, there's a phrase for this. Does anybody want to give me the phrase? Anybody want to give me the phrases? Yes, it's sadomasochism. And if I had read this at my ordination council, it would not have been preceded. If I had read this and said that I am looking the day I am ordained to feel the very pain of my entrails removed, the spear into my heart, that I can moan with the ecstasy of the pain. Could you see the ordination council look at me? All right, they look at me now. I get that. I realize that the ordination council still to this day wonders what they ever did, as does everybody else. All right. So then, this is bad enough. Then we get to fallen angels. And let me talk to you about fallen angels. I have a quote for you that you might find absolutely fascinating. For many, the host of angels and demons are like two inextricably linked sides of one great battle. You have angels and then you have demons, and demons are fallen angels. Now, here's one for you that may be a surprise to you. The conflagration of angels and demons appears to be the invention, keyword invention, of Christian writers. The concept of rebellious angels being kicked out of heaven and becoming fundamentally evil only gained popularity around the 3rd century in terms of a timeline. The confusion may have arisen in part because of a misunderstanding of the Greek word demon, which could have meant to refer to all manner of things. The word in Greek meant spirits, gods, human souls, or even the entire concept of the divine without moral judgment. Now, where does this get its start? You're going to love this, by a complete misunderstanding of Isaiah and the morning star. In the book of the prophet Isaiah, it was understood at this time that the brightest star at night was Venus. And Venus was the brightest star. And then, of course, as the sun comes up, the star falls. To the human mind, the human eye, it falls. Another name for this bright star falling was Lucifer, the falling star. It had no moral judgment. And the mythology begins that Venus was thinking it was better than everybody else because it was so bright in the dark night. But what happens in Greek mythology, the famous, the higher you go, hubris, you fall. And as you fall, it reminds us every night that when you see the bright star, you're going to fall. And so the sun comes up, the bright, huge sun, to replace it. In the book of Isaiah, the prophet is mad at either Nebuchadnezzar or Nebuchadrezzar, one of them, for attacking Babylon, for attacking Jerusalem and wiping it out. One of these Babylonian kings, where it's not clear in the text, was responsible for the destruction of Jerusalem and the Great Exile. In fact, there were two of them, one in 596 and the final one in 586. There were two exiles. Everybody forgets that. Why would you know that? You forget it. And who caused this? And so the prophet says, just like Venus goes, you will go, and you will fall too, like Lucifer. Somewhere out of this mess, which was meant about a specific time and a specific king, taking a look at an age-old idea of the Venus collapsing at night, comes Lucifer, the demon. So then we have all the other stuff with Rococo, little fat cupids and everything else coming along, and all kinds of debates. And then we forget, while people are thinking of romantic cherubs with arrows being flicked at you, we've got Teresa of Avila with sadomasochism, being pained, entrails and hearts and everything else. And we forget the cute angels that were the angel of death that wiped out the firstborn in Egypt, and the two angels that had flaming swords that kicked you out of the Garden of Eden and kept you out of the Garden of Eden. Not sweet things. And Danny pointed out the angel that wrestled with Jacob, that was a very strange encounter. Now, I have some ideas about this, all of this, and they may be wrong, but they're just some ideas because I didn't know anything about angels till we started this. Now I have more knowledge about angels than I wished I knew, but I guess it's going to be helpful somewhere. Some ideas, and then let me throw out to you for discussion. It seems to me that we've got a number of issues here. When people in antiquity who are considered important, like Aristotle, or if you want Thomas Aquinas, or if you want Teresa of Avila, or if you want writers in the Hebrew Bible who are reflecting Babylonian and Egyptian mythologies, when people pass down something, it's almost taboo to argue with them. The reason a congregation like this exists is because we basically are people who argue and rebel and just don't take things at face value. There has to be a place for people like us. My suspicion is that there are some people in life who, if you say no, you immediately want to know why. If somebody says, thou shalt not, you want to know why not. If somebody says, this is written, my response is, so what? I need to know more. I found early on that when you have what's called a received text, this is the final edition of the text. I want to know what went into the text before it was the final edition. Somehow I need to know what was edited out. The most classic example I can think of is the Gospel of Mark. The earliest gospel that we have, the collection of this gospel now, the earliest reprint. By the way, just let me remind everybody, digressing very quickly, that nothing we have in the New Testament is new. Everything we have are copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of copies. They were significantly altered. There is a book by Bart Ehrman called Misquoting Jesus, where he shows you pictures of the copies we have, and editorial comments made, words crossed out, new words put in. And a classic example of this, the earliest text we now have of the Gospel of Mark says, and I mentioned to you this before, is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph the carpenter and Mary his mother? It is understood in this gospel that Jesus is born very naturally of Joseph and Mary. There is no Bethlehem story. There's no virgin birth here. It's just Joseph and Mary. By the way, Paul echoes this when he says, is not just Jesus born of the flesh? Paul being the first writer, Mark being the first gospel. Before we found this earliest edition of Mark, the only edition we had said, is not this Jesus, the son of Mary? They removed the son of Joseph and Mary because this no longer conformed to doctrine. So editorial groups. So when I get a received text, that's not enough. I want to know what was edited out. I want to know the politics of the time. I wanted to know who interfered. I want to know what the original words were and why. So there has to be a place for people like us who are not happy with the original text. If it says, and the council passed, that's not enough to me. I want to know why the council voted against. I want to know who made up the council. I want to know the politics of the time. There is a famous, Bertrand Russell, by the way, really let loose on this. There was a famous Third Ecumenical Council. It turns out it was held in Alexandria, Egypt. And what happened was Cyril, the famous patriarch, had the bishops of the East arrive early. They voted early. And as the bishops of the West arrived, he had them physically locked out of the cathedral so they couldn't vote. Now, if it wasn't for good historians who kept that alive, you and I would not know how corrupt things were even back then. So there's got to be a place for questioning, a place for that's not enough, I need to know more, and a place for healthy doubt. This does not work for everybody. I'm very, very well of that. I'm very, very well of the fact that people are willfully ignorant and are happily willfully ignorant. And it's not just in the United States, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. I'm very well aware of that. But there is in every religion a cluster of people that are not happy with the received, this is the way it is, this is the way it is written. My famous rejoinder is written, so what? I need to know more. And I've trained my students, by the way, God help what I've loosed on Miami-Dade County. In fact, I have a man who's 68 years old taking my world religion class. And he says, I feel for the traditionalists in this county. They have no idea the thousands of students you've loosed on this county who will never accept this is it. They're going to want to know more. And he said he's, by the way, he may be joining us after the semester's over. So I'm just sharing with you, there's got to be a place for people like us. And the reality is most people are afraid to challenge an Aristotle or a Maimonides or Teresa of Avila or. And sometimes when you uncover rocks, when we do the Bible biography, guess who will argue that a lot of the stuff that we're reading in the Bible is baby talk? Calvin. I didn't know that. John Calvin said a lot of the stuff we're reading is baby talk. It doesn't make sense. Who knew that? I certainly didn't. But Karen Armstrong did, and she'll point it out. So when you least expect it, you get help in strange places. So having said that, my first thing is people get stuck very easily and very quickly. If so-and-so said it, it must be right. My opinion is if so-and-so said it, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Not everybody feels comfortable with that. Number two, opinions, we tend to forget of the greats are often opinions. Somehow a great person's opinion gets translated into this is it. That involves some more discussion. At what point did it become this is it? Did you know that Siddhartha, here's one for you, was not called the Buddha to 200 to 300 years after he died? Did you know that historically? Siddhartha dies. It's not till 200 or 300 years later he's called the awakened one, the enlightened one. Yeah. Confucius was nothing in his own time. It wasn't until his followers and his followers wound up in major places of government that his ideas began to be operated on and worked on, and then he became famous. Now I'm missing some great chats here. Omar Khayyam talks much about the pain of too much tenderness. Isn't the function of education to teach you how to think independently? The teachers I am best are those who challenge my assumptions. Yeah, well, guess what? You're going to get a few of those. My experience has been there are just not a lot of teachers that do that. They just have a thing they have to teach. They teach it, and that's it. And by the way, I don't know if you're aware of this, to compound this, the legislature of Republicans in the state of Florida is now putting together a list that wants to know about what you teach and how you teach. Oddly enough, the list hasn't come out yet of questions wanting to know to be sure that teachers and students are getting a fair approach. Oh, I'd love to see them debate with me on religion. Oh, I would love to do that. Oh, yes, yes, yes. It would not be pleasant. And of course, at my age, what are they going to do about it? By the way, there is some value in being ancient. What are they going to do? What are they going to threaten you with? Seriously, what are they going to threaten you with? You're fired? Whoopee. I mean, hello. I started my 77th year. Whoopee, they're going to fire you? What pension? Ha! I mean, I've got my money. I mean, so are they going to fire? But I would love to debate. You'll find if there's any debating, they will not invite people like me. That happened once, by the way, in Volusia County. I was asked to attend a Board of Education meeting at a town outside of Port Orange. And they said, we have fundamentalists. None of us know the Bible. You do. It's an embarrassment. Would you please deal with this situation? So I went. It was not pleasant. I had a great time. Oh, yes. But you need a community that nurtures asking of questions. You need a community that nurtures that. And damn it all, you better continue All Souls when I retire, because you're going to need a community here that does that draws together all of you from different backgrounds. It is absolutely essential that you've got multiple backgrounds to keep that stew with a certain spicy flavor. Am I making sense to everybody? We need that. We've got a Russian Orthodox in the congregation. We have a Sufi in the congregation. We've got tons of atheists. We've got tons of Christian humanists. We've got lots of Jews in the congregation. That's what makes sense. The guardrails that keep us from going out off the rail, off the reservation. So that's what we need. Now, having said that, I have some ideas about how angels came about. Now, this is where a lot of you may disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. I was thinking about the following kinds of things. William James put together a very famous book called Varieties of Religious Experience. It was from two lectures, Gifford lectures, a series of lectures. And he did that because he's a liberal, and he said traditionalists don't seem to realize that people have religious experiences. You can't get around it. In every culture, every generation, there are a number of different experiences that show up again and again and again and again. That is an empirical fact. Okay, number two, Rudolf Otto wrote this very famous book, The Idea of the Holy. And he says, you can't get around the fact that sometimes you will be at places and you get overwhelmed by what he called the mysterious tremendum. You could be at Machu Picchu. John Fraser, that college professor, I will never forget when he came to us. This was, I roared and hugged him at the same time. He goes to Machu Picchu. He's an avowed atheist. He had a religious experience. It annoyed the hell out of him. I said, why? Since when can't you be a Hindu? He says, what do you mean? A Hindu would say you could be an atheist and have a religious experience at the same time. So what? The one thing I love about Hinduism, they can take two different things that make no sense, and they say perfectly fine. Why not? In our upbringing, you must be consistent. You will be consistent. You will like consistency. You will have the consistency. Yes. Hinduism says, why? Why? You can be an atheist. You can have religious experience. So what? They're not consistent. Life isn't consistent. So John comes to All Souls and he said, I'm an atheist and I had a religious experience. So I have to share this because nobody will get it. You will. Everybody laughed. And they said, so what's the problem? You walk, Rudolf Otto says, you go to a mound, an ancient mound, you feel something. You go through an ancient ruin, you feel something. Much to your utter shock, you may walk into some kind of temple, a church, a mosque, a synagogue. If it's the right, you can sense something. Not everybody, but people do. Right, the Redwood Forest, it doesn't make any difference. You get what I'm saying. There are places you can go where you get knocked, you get overwhelmed. You can feel it. Then you get Carl Jung, who then looks at archetypes and finds religious experiences are an archetype, again, echoing what William James said, and then Joseph Campbell does the same thing. And I'm thinking of somebody like me who understands atheism, is not at all, how do I put this? I started out my journey believing in a very, very personal being, but was overwhelmed by the problems I had of, if this being is all powerful and all knowing, why didn't this being know, if he's all knowing, all of these bad things were going to happen? If he's all powerful, then why didn't use the power to correct it and fix it? Like the great fixer. I keep on talking about that. If a God is all knowing, God has to know everything that's going to happen. So why, you know in advance what's going to happen. So why do you let things like that happen? And as I was more and more in the ministry, the more pain and suffering I found, not only around me in the world, but in individual lives. So I changed my theology. I didn't change my belief in a higher power. I just relocated it from that of a being. And I understood humanism. I understood Christian humanism, Jewish humanism, atheists. I understood all of that. But it wasn't until I had my own, if you don't like religious experience, no one like those words anymore. Encounter, moment, something you didn't expect. And so my experience has been lots of people, when they least expect it, have a powerful encounter. Usually when you least expect it, and most often not in a building that's a church, mosque, or synagogue. How do you like that for an interesting observation? You have most people, their most interesting encounters, religious experiences, when you would least expect it and not necessarily where you expect it. Maybe my theory is, and I may be all wrong, since human beings are not good, Homo sapiens are not good at theorizing, you need to make it concrete. And so what is a better way to start than angels? My suggestion is, are ways to concretize experiences that people have and they're not sure whatever else to do. Now, I have a bunch of people at All Souls that wrote about their experiences with angels. What it seemed to me from what I got and I read was that people had personal experiences that were overwhelming and powerful. So what label did they put on these experiences, which said my guardian angel, my angel looked over me? It was a way to concretize and try to make sense of an emotion that was overpowering. My suspicion is in antiquity, something happened. And so you tried to make it concrete. And as Homo sapiens always do, then it takes off on its own. It has a life of its own. You have encounters, they grow, other people talk, other cultures have encounters, and then this whole thing takes off. They're given different names in different languages, but it's the same thing. It's like an angel. Just like the word God is not God's name. Yahweh Elohim, Brahman, whatever have you. Angels may be simply a way, I'm arguing, of how you try to make concrete a powerful experience. And then somehow, as Homo sapiens do, this takes on a life of its own. That's just a theory. And so what we've done is look at how people have taken, how this thing is taken off on its own and off its bend and concretized. And when people have very powerful meetings in their life, powerful moments, they either say, I had a religious experience, I had an encounter, I had a moment, I had a mysterious tremendum, or I had an angel. To me, they're all examples of the same thing, that something powerful happened. Now, I will delightfully shut up, ask you to fire away, give you some of your own opines about what all this means to you. I may be way off the mark, but I still can't get over Teresa of Avila. That has really done it for me in terms of that was the final straw. I got annoyed enough about feathers and halos and trumpets and fire or compressed gas, thank you, Ron, or other kinds of things. But that thing with the spear and the entrails and the heart, well, that did it. But people have things happen to them. So I was trying to balance, what do you do when something happens versus this stuff over here? Am I making any sense to anybody this morning? I probably am not. All right, so somebody fire away. Maureen, go ahead.
With angels like Teresa of Avila, who needs demons? I mean, gosh, that I would not want to meet that angel. And I had a question for you. When does the term Lucifer first appear in Christian writings? Since obviously it's not in the Old Testament or New Testament. So when do we start
Third
reading?
century, they're arguing about the 200s.
About the 200s, that's when.
And it's all made up. This is not going to find, again, this is a mistranslation of a prophecy that was supposed to take place in the 500s. Just like you're going to meet your end. I can think of several political people, they're going to meet their end. You think of, I'm not going to start naming names, but, people that the old thing, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Well, you live badly, things will happen to you badly. It's an observation. And the Hindus were the first to write that down. I mean, it's been out there long, but karma, you reap what you sow. The first ones to write it down and make something of it were the Hindus, but others, it was out there a long time, but they were the first ones to write it down. By the way, do let me put in a plug for, I've always liked the idea of Hindu. I wish I would have known this when I was growing up. It would have made things much easier for me as a person. You could have X and you could have Y. They totally disagree. So what? That's perfectly fine. I was raised in this Northern European education that everything must be consistent. It must make sense. And the fact of the matter, I found a lot of things that didn't make sense. They made sense to me, but according to everything around me, you couldn't do that. My life would have been much easier if it's somebody who'd give me other templates. Is that true for anybody else, by the way?
Definitely.
Better late than never is a great thing to remember for all of us. Some other ideas that you have about angels. Again, there is no right or wrong here. Go ahead, AJ.
I still don't really believe in angels, I mean, fluffy little things with wings. I just never, ever had that concept. An angel to me, and I think I told you about this, it's really a person. It could be an animal, a cat or a dog, who comes to me when I'm really at loss about something. And so almost miraculously, some person, would appear and help me with something that I'm really struggling with. Even this morning, I couldn't get my Wi-Fi to work at all. And so I went down to the front desk, and this wonderful woman, who is probably a millennial, said, "I will do anything I can to help you get on that Zoom call." So, and my concept is that's what an angel is to me, somebody who has done something really wonderful, almost unexpected. So that's my
Okay.
example.
Anybody else? Anybody else? This is an open discussion. Anybody else? Now, Roy, do you have anything to throw in from Washington?
Let me think. I mean, it was always clear to me, my teacher used to talk a lot about these stories, but it was always, it was clearly, that like the underlying lessons, it wasn't meant to be taken literally, as you often say. He talked about different worlds, and that's a sort of a Sufi thing, different layers of the heart corresponding to different realities. And he was talking about, and what they would say is that these deeper realities are actually more real than what we call reality. And he was talking about an inner journey so he wasn't telling children's stories. He was mining the wisdom of these stories that were, that have been. So
angels, in a sense, and stories about angels are really simply stories to how you get the different layers of your journey to the inner soul.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. That's good. Anybody else have something to, Melissa?
In August, I went to Casadega, Florida. I don't know if any of you know that community. It's a spiritualist community, a very old one. And my daughter and I both had readings, spiritual readings with a spiritualist there. Their belief is that they rely on a go-between between our world and the other world. And it sounds like an angel to me. I had an hour reading, more than an hour actually, and I found it very worthwhile. It wasn't predicting my future or any of that kind of thing. But that whole community is a religious community in a way. And they don't tell your fortune. They believe in this spirit that actually can help them, help you also reach out to people who've already passed on to the other realm and vice versa. Anyway, I found it intriguing. So did my daughter.
Okay, one more interesting thing that I just came to me is he didn't just talk about angels. He talked about angels and Jinn, which is like, we think of, in the West, we call it a genie, but in Islam, it's a thing, the Jinn, which is like a different form of spiritual being, sort of a different class than angels.
Okay, anybody else? Anybody else here? I'm looking at the time. Yes, Annette.
For me, it always comes back to my interpretations, very highly influenced by Jung and by my readings of Joseph Campbell. And so I see them as purely symbolic, as teaching tools, as distractions, as ways to cope, ways to celebrate when we don't have a real concrete idea of what has just happened. Oh, it was an angel that saved me, that kind of thing. But I see it as part of the human brain's coping mechanism.
That's what I said earlier, the same kind of thing, of thing earlier. We need to concretize something. It's not enough just to have it. You need some kind of concrete. Yeah. Do let me say the following on that kind of vein. We've got a holiday, 2 holidays coming up. 3. We got Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, and Christmas. Now, we navigated this really well at Passover and Easter this year. Everybody showed up and we were able to get over this thing. Let me give you the business here. There are good reasons to celebrate cycles, and holidays. It's part of what we do as a species. Since some of you I will not see over tomorrow, just let me remind everybody, you are smart enough to dissociate later stuff versus the stuff that happened. You know that. You know that those paintings of the pilgrims and stuff, and celebrating Thanksgiving in November makes absolutely no sense at all. You do know that. It was snow on the ground and freezing. Nobody would be out there having pumpkin pies and stuff like that. Secondly, the nice pilgrims and Puritans wiped out most of the Indians from disease. Let's remember everybody about that. And it wasn't a hunky-dory painting. Let's be realistic about this. The few that survived, there were very few survived winters. Natives survived diseases they didn't think about. So you can give Thanksgiving for the human spirit. I mean, the things we can enjoy these holidays without overloaded theories upon theories upon theories that try to mask what things that happen. So let me give you a good idea to remind you that the holidays can be deeply, deeply moving and deeply, deeply enriching. In the past, liberals have just deserted holidays like they were the plague, and there's no reason for that. Births are births, births are births. Idea of Hanukkah is rededication of the Second Temple. The idea of light overcoming darkness. Hello, that's light overcoming darkness. The joy of births. Hello, those are things that should be celebrated all the time. I mean, hello, that's what we should be centering on. And so I just share that with you. Though I am very liberal, I very much believe in rituals, and I believe in rituals that are grounded in, yeah, we just had Diwali. Yes. It's Festival of Light. Absolutely. And Ramadan is a great time to remember about fasting, which is we're dealing with Islam in class now. And by the way, interesting, Roy, you may find this interesting. I'm coming up with Sufi, and we're doing a number of poems by Rumi. Most of my Muslim students have never read anything from Sufi. And my Muslim students always say to me, it's fascinating that we are Muslim and we don't know anything about Sufi Islam. And now you've taught us something about our own religion. These are excellent poems. We didn't know anything about this. We didn't know anything about the one and the mysticism and all. We didn't know anything about that. So there are all these things that we can celebrate and learn and riff off of. So we've got Thanksgiving in a real sense. And by the way, the original stories are far more powerful. They've got lumped on them afterwards. I mean, it's nice to think angels flying all over the place and trumpets and songs and things like that. But being able to survive birth 2,000 years ago, let me make this real very quickly. In Afghanistan today, I keep doing this with my students too, because the statistics are so horrific. I find it hard to believe in 2021. 1/2 the population in Afghanistan is 15 years old and younger. The number of girls being sold off into marriage right now at 8, 9, 10, and 11 is horrific because people have too many kids in the family and they're selling them. It's illegal, but they're selling them. It's all over. Lots of articles lately about this. If you are between the ages of 1 and 6, listen to this, you have a 66% chance of dying. If you're a woman, all women give birth at home, 1 in 8 will die in childbirth. This is in 2021. So when you're talking about Christmas time and births, this is a big deal. We tend to think, hey, we've got midwives. Melissa was a midwife for 1,500 years. It was just, I mean, you've got midwives, we got hospitals, but a lot of places today, birthing is a horrific thing. So celebrating a birth is something serious. And we just kind of blather, just think of Afghanistan. 1 in 8 women will die in childbirth in 2021. So when we think about the upcoming holiday, these are just, I'm making a plug is what I'm doing about why we need to be together. Light overcoming dark. As simple as it can be. Remember that famous writing in a concentration camp, I still believe in the sun. Wow. So having said all of that, let me let's see, we got Maureen and Pat here today. AJ is down in Dallas. Doug is in Munich. We have Kathy with us today. Melissa. Nanette is in the far north where it is 900 below. We've got compressed. We've got Ron. Ron, you're gonna miss being teased for a few weeks. You may have withdrawal symptoms.
I'll try to keep, yeah.
All right, good.
Definitely.
We got Lucille. Bless you, Lucille, for being able to join us. Lucille's mother is very, very old, and she takes care of her mother like all the time. Bless you, Lucille. Kristen, good morning to you. Danny, as always. Roy from Bellingham. Bellingham, right? Bellingham, right? All right. Serge
yeah.
Cruz. We never know where Serge Cruz is. Serge doesn't know where Serge Cruz is. And Tony Lee from Miami Lakes. We will see each other in several weeks on Saturday. I'll get more specific about that. We'll get the book. We'll have a lot of fun with this. Karen Armstrong's The Bible, a Biography. In the meantime, we have got tremendous services coming up. They will all be on Zoom, and we'll have a couple of face-to-face for the first time in 2 years. So, peace and blessings. I will post this in a little while. Be safe and well. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.